Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is David Perkins. I'm from Lincolnville, Maine, and I'm recently joined the Forward Party and am serving as the Maine chair. Today, we're going to have a discussion, and then we're going to open it up to you for your questions. And then afterwards, we're going to share food, conversations afterwards. With me today is Governor Whitman, who is a co-founder of the Forward Party. She's a former governor who was extremely strong on environmental matters, problem solving, bringing people together. And then she served as the head of the United States EPA during the Bush administration, where she did a great deal of work on reclaiming brownfield industrial sites and working towards a clean environment. And most recently, she's now working towards the goals of the Forward Party. Also with us is Senator Rick Bennett, who's running for Governor of Maine. As an independent. And in this election cycle, he is the first candidate that the Forward Party is endorsing and backing, so we're making history today. Rick has a background in business. He knows what it's like to have a payroll due on a Friday. He's worked with businesses that are restructuring and trying to find their way through the challenges that Maine small businesses have. He served as a senator in this state. He shared with me that when he was the president of the Maine Senate, the Republicans and the Democrats had exactly the same number of members. So he had good training for what he's about to do. So we're going to move into the moderated section now. I'll ask some questions, but also be thinking about your questions, because that's what we really want to hear. Both of you have built careers around integrity and results over partisanship. What does principled leadership look like in a moment when outrage often dominates the political conversation? Governor?
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here, and this is important because this is the first of our 2026 cycle endorsements, and we're just delighted to be able to endorse Rick Bennett, Senator Bennett, because he represents the principles of Forward. And we are building a new party from the ground up to give the people representatives who really represent them. But to answer your question, to me, it's transparency and it's honesty. It's talking to people about the issues that are important to them, not to a political party, and it's about being straight with people. I have no problem if someone changes their mind because they found out something different, but tell me what it is. You got to explain it to me. You've got to be clear with the public to say why this is different than what you thought it was. And principled leadership, as I say to people, particularly kids when I talk to them, there's only one person with whom you get up every morning and go to bed with every night. And you want to be able to look at them in the mirror and say, okay, I can live with myself. I did the right thing. We all have that little thing they call a conscience somewhere. And you want to be able to know that you have done what you believe to be in the best interests of the greatest number of people. And you've done it with integrity and honesty.
Well, first of all, I just want to start by saying thank you, Dave, for taking the lead on the Forward Party here in Maine and for moderating this discussion. And I am just overwhelmed and overjoyed and deeply honored that for the first, to be the recipient of your first support and endorsement for the 2026 election cycle nationally. It's a big deal, and it says something about your organization's willingness to lean in and with on the matter of change. And also, I'm just deeply honored to have the support, which I know that it brings with it. But as Governor said, I mean, leadership starts with integrity, and I cannot tell you how many people I see around this state who they don't really care if they line up with you on every policy matter. They want to know that you believe in something, you stand for something, you have the integrity to speak to it. And the authenticity that goes along with that is something people just are craving. People are fed up with politics as usual. I'm fed up with politics as usual. And we need to demand better of this system. And really that's what our candidacy is about. It's about building a politics of decency and dignity and really returning the respect to the voters and building, you know, politics has gotten so toxic, and great people that I used to be involved with back in the 90s when I first got involved in politics have been driven out of the system because they don't want to be associated with it anymore. Why? Because it represents too often the worst angels of our nature rather than the better angels of our nature. So our candidacy is built on building a new kind of politics that actually embraces these great values that we share and gives people the respect that they deserve and the government that they deserve, which is honest, integrity, and actually deals with trying to get results rather than just keeping a fight going, which is what it's all too often about these days.
And that's what Forward's about. That's why we're here. That's why I'm here, because you represent everything, and particularly in that answer that Forward, in which Forward believes.
Thank you.
So the Forward Party is not based really on a platform, but on shared values. Governor, can you explain what that means and how that works?
Absolutely. We are not a traditional party because we don't tell our candidates that they have to be pro-gun or anti-choice or anything like that. In order to be endorsed by the Forward Party, and we will, where we're not on the ballot yet as a recognized party, we endorse Republicans, Democrats, Independents if they sign our pledge. And we do a deep dive to make sure that they have represented that pledge in their life to date. But it almost embarrasses me to say it. But that pledge says that you agree to uphold the rule of law, respect the Constitution, work with anyone to solve problems, create a safe space to discuss controversial issues, and work to ensure that anyone who has the legal right to vote gets to vote. And that's based on the principles of decency, democracy, and diversity. And that's it, because then it should be up to the candidates and our state parties to decide what's important in this state, what's important to my constituents. There's so many people who don't realize the kind of control that the two-party systems, the duopoly that we have today, these two parties, the control they have over their representatives. After I'd won re-election in 1997, I was asked to run for the United States Senate. Didn't really want to, but I said, fine, I'll go down and talk to them. I talked to the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee back in 97, and I was told if I said one word about campaign finance reform, I'd never get any support from them. And that's what has happened to our elected officials. And that's wrong. I mean, if anybody thinks after the last month that government's working for us, I think you might have to revisit that. But that's why we need candidates. We're focused primarily at the state and local level, because those are the offices that make the decisions that most immediately affect your life and everyday life. And frankly, it's going to be up to the states, the governors, the secretaries of state, the attorneys general, to uphold the rule of law and defend the Constitution, because I think our democracy is teetering right now on the edge, and we need people of integrity who will stand up to help rebuild and ensure that we continue to have the kind of country that we want to live in.
So Rick, in the context of being an independent candidate for governor of Maine, how does that shared values concept fit within your campaign?
I think there's a lot of values that Maine people share. I mean, we're all human beings, and we have this lovely side to our nature, which sometimes we hide, but which, I think we should demonstrate more in politics. And those shared values are kindness, civility, love, an appreciation for each other, a respect for each other. And, these are radical thoughts in today's politics. How did we get there? So the question about shared values, I think they're abundantly clear. We also want the best for each other. We want fairness. We want a system which is fair and treats people well. And too often we have a system that benefits the few and not the many. I think about another whole area, which is one thing I know all Mainers share is a love of our environment, a deep appreciation for our outdoors, clean water, clean air. It's part of our DNA, and it's so there's so many positive things that we share as values. And again, the politics should be built on those shared, those things that we share. All those positive things, and we can. It's just a willful act, but we don't demand it. And so my whole candidacy is an expression of that and an invitation to everybody to invest themselves in a joyous effort. Another word you don't hear much in politics. But I said this at our announcement in June. We're running a joyful campaign. We want to bring joy back to politics. It used to be joyful when I got involved as a young man back in the late 80s, 1990s, volunteering on campaigns. We had fun. It was like a community coming together. Sure, we'd had some disagreements and there were sharp elbows here and there on particular issues, but there was a sense of common purpose. Built around those shared values. And of course, one of the most critical shared values we have is a functioning democracy, which really unites all of us as Americans together, as Mainers. And as the governor says, this is a fragile, fraught system right now, and I worry about it. This is an inflection point in our state's future and our national future. And we have to take advantage of that now. And that is fundamentally why I'm running for governor and running as an independent, to show a different way forward. And if we can do this here in Maine, where our motto, as we all know, is "Dare a go, I lead," then we can be that model for the rest of the country.
Let's talk about trust. We all laugh at our government right now because we'd be crying otherwise. How do you work with independent candidates and the Forward Party to help people rebuild their trust in our government?
Well, that's why we have candidates like the senator. We have people who speak directly to their constituents, who understand their issues, and who will put forward ideas and say, this is what I want to accomplish. Because my father, who was a Republican state chairman, used to say that the best politics is good policy. I mean, that's what we need in this country. And it's also the other thing, the way to build trust is to show that you care. And that's what this candidacy is about, caring about Maine, caring about what's good for the constituents. But in order to be able to do that in today's world, you have to have a structure behind you. There has to be a group that can help you with that, with ideas. One of the things that we're going to be doing at Forward National is we have 10 major issues that we think are important for the country to consider. Things, economic issues, environmental issues, what's happening with our government. I mean, how do you do redistricting? And we're going to be working on those ideas and getting people who are experts in the field to tease out within those big areas what are the most important things within those areas, and then show and look, as we can do at a national level, where those problems have been solved in other places successfully, and give them to our candidates and say, if this works for you, fine. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. If this is an issue important to you, great. If we can help you with your ideas, we'll do that. But we're not saying you have to take this issue up. We're not saying this is the one you have to support. So we want candidates who think for themselves, who know their constituencies, but what we're really doing is giving them the freedom to do that. Because if they do that within the current party structure, they'll lose their chairmanship of their various committees. They will have candidates run against them by their own party in their primaries. They will have money taken away from them. And that's just wrong. 80% of the states in the United States of America now are single-party states, either all red or all blue. I don't care whether it's Republican or Democrat. When a state is in the hands of just one party, that's not healthy. And of that, 70% of elected offices, voters only have one choice. They don't have two. There's just one person running for that office. And of those, 5 to 10% are never filled. That's wrong. So we want to get those candidates out there. We want to support those that represent our values, as Rick does. And we want to find those candidates in the state and in the local offices as well who represent those, and particularly in offices where there's only one choice, where you feel, why vote? Because it doesn't matter, because I'm a Democrat in a Republican district or vice versa, and change that dynamic so we get a really functioning, we get the kind of government our founding fathers envisioned. They warned us that the worst thing that could happen to us as a democracy is two parties. They envisioned ever-changing groups that came together over different issues to get things done. That's what we want to get back to.
George Washington in his farewell address, yeah. I was just smiling partly during your comments, Governor, because I was thinking about the challenges of our campaign. As an independent, we're not handed a party platform. We're not handed dogma or ideology that we have to get behind. And when you're in the party, you have to get behind it increasingly. Our second hire on our campaign was Sarah Nichols, who's up in the back. She's our policy director. And I've asked Sarah to, first of all, it's really great fun doing this because somebody writes an interesting op-ed in the paper and I can call them up and say, tell me more about that. I don't care where their political pedigree is. It's a learning opportunity. And so we're having fun putting together this. But the first question I asked Sarah and we talk about is, in this particular policy area with drug pricing, energy, schools, what are the best states doing? Where are the best policies being applied? And how can we adopt them into Maine? Can we learn from them to change what we're doing in Maine? And let's build that out. So we're building out a policy platform. It's going to be online at our website soon. I think in the next few days, the start of it, and I want you all to participate in it. Tell us about your ideas. How does, every person in this room is an expert in something, and I know that because I know most of you. And, and I want to hear from you. And Sarah's got this great, we've got this great questionnaire on the website to tease out from you all your own thoughts about how can we serve Maine better? How can we help Maine people? How can we get systems that work again? And so we're looking at, a lot of really difficult issues, as we all know, are facing Maine. We've got the highest energy prices in New England, right? That's in the news all the time. Our schools aren't doing real well, right? Fourth graders, only 27% of fourth graders are reading at that level of proficiency. 27%. 33% at numeracy. The math skills, if you can't read at fourth grade level, it's almost irreparable. So we need to deal with these issues. They're not partisan issues. No. They're issues that everybody cares about at the kitchen table. They're talking about the kitchen table. Housing. My God, we have the need for 80,000 housing units in Maine. Childcare. These tie in together in terms of making it challenging for employers to hire people because they can't find workers because the workers can't afford the home. So all these issues are interrelated and they defy partisan dogma. They really do. And it's time to set that aside and bring out the best of everybody, pull it together, and let's get it done.
Governor, let's talk about what type of structural changes you and the Forward Party are looking for to create a healthy political life.
Well, again, what we do is we want to see as much opportunity for people to vote as there should be. And so we're talking about and encouraging our candidates to open primaries. Fortunately, Rick was part of opening up primaries here in the state of Maine. That's exactly what we want to see, but there are other ways to do it. So you can have ranked choice voting, you can have open primaries, you can have first across the line. There are different ways of doing it. So what we're doing is saying, okay, this as a whole is an important issue. How do we get this system working again? And then take these different ideas and saying, okay, here's a different way to do it. These are 3 or 4 ways that it's been done successfully. You figure out what's going to work for you. I mean, for instance, in Jersey, we're never going to get ranked choice voting. But we could get fusion voting, which means a candidate can be endorsed by more than one party. So that's possible. So that's where we're working in New Jersey to accomplish that. But those are the kinds of things that we want to see happen. We want to see the process, particularly see the process open so that people who have a right to vote can vote, that voters have a choice, and voters can be comfortable that they're electing people that will respond to them and not to a political party, that they don't have to be locked in to a certain way of looking at issues and only addressing certain issues. Because the real tragedy that we have in this country at the national level particularly is these problems are all solvable. Immigration is solvable, but neither party wants to solve it because they want to use that issue to get their base all jazzed up. And then what you have is you get these splits being ever greater. I mean, there used to be a time where, as you said, people would work together, Republicans, Democrats, they'd argue, and when they were in the halls of Congress and there were sharp elbows, they'd go out and have a drink afterwards and say, okay, how do we solve the problem? And that's what we should be about. We should be about solving problems.
Yeah, the incentives in politics these days, and it's gotten to this point where there has been a remarkable change. There are more incentives in the parties to keep fighting with each other than to solve the problems. I mean, when you think about it, this is why the federal government gets shut down. It's why in the state legislature, we can't pass a consensus budget anymore. And we have to go through this artifice of shutting down the legislature and then restarting it the following day and pretending it's a new session, just so that we can get the budget. The majority party needs to pass a budget. The minority party wants to vote against it. There's no incentive for people to work together in the parties. And so I think the structural reform, some of the things you talked about, Governor, are dead on right. Campaign finance reform, I add to that, it's critically important. And been frustrated in Maine getting those changes in place. But the reason that it's important is that this current system, people's eyes glaze over when you talk about some of these things, ranked choice voting, fusion, I don't know. But the reason it's important is that the current system is about fighting. It's not about resolving issues, and it's not working. We need to get results for the people of Maine and the people across this country. There are issues that need to be dealt with. And the current system is completely incapable of dealing with those issues. Completely. And it's because it has gotten to the point where conflict is the whole point, not resolution. So we have an opportunity to do things anew. And again, the agency of our campaign is geared toward that. I'm running for governor as an independent because I want to govern as an independent, which is different. It means that I can choose, if anybody wants to serve in the cabinet, I get to choose. I don't have to be putting an R in there or a D in there. Find the best people. And it's really a great opportunity, but also on the policy front, as I said earlier, we can think anew, think about what's best for Maine people, and just set aside all the dogma, and get things done. That is what people want, is actual, real results. And they're not getting it from the partisan structure.
Rick, could you follow up on something the governor said, how not too long ago, politicians would fight on the halls of whatever the legislature, but then they'd get together for a drink afterwards and have friendship. Share a little bit about how your personality and your personal way of dealing with people would be like as if you were the governor.
Yeah, well, I'll just talk about a time that you referred to in about 25 years ago, when we woke up one day after an election and we learned that the results gave us 17 Republican senators, 17 Democratic senators, and 1 independent. We had an independent governor at the time. The Democrats had control of the House. There was just no thought that the Senate would be at all functional. Mary Small is sitting here in the front row. She was a senator at the time and was the Republican leader, as it turned out, during that incredibly interesting session. But we, many of you know Mike Mishu, who later became a congressman for 12 years, ran for governor. And God bless Mike, by the way. He just gave me a tour of East Millinocket redevelopment site of the mill up there. Mike, after all of that esteemed career, you know what he did? Went back to East Millinocket and ran for selectman. He's trying to turn East Millinocket around and help locally. I mean, that's amazing. But Mike was the Democratic leader. I was the Republican leader. Everybody expected failure. We got together and we said, let's prove the naysayers wrong. And so we created a power sharing agreement, which worked out great. And we went back to the rules of the playground, actually. We needed to appoint committee chairs. Well, usually the president of the Senate did that. Well, we had 2 presidents of the Senate, so we flipped a coin. And I think he won. So he got to pick which committee he named his Democratic senator to chair. And then I got to pick another committee. So we lined them up like they're kids in a pickup game of baseball. And then we had the thing of, kids sharing a brownie, right? What do? We had all this office space, and like the majority party usually had a big piece of it, the minority party had a little piece of it. What do? So we had one party divide up the office space, and the other party pick which one they wanted. There are ways of doing this if you just treat people well, and you have a common expectation of success rather than failure. But right now, the rewards, as I said, are for failure, not for success. So first, be willful, to answer your question. You have to be willful. You have to bring people together. You have to realize that politics isn't about exclusion. It's about inclusion. It's about more voices being heard, more people at the table. Yes, it creates friction and difficulties when you do that. And I've dealt with such things in politics. I've dealt with such things in business. But it's the way to get the best results. And results are what we must focus on.
Do you want to add to that?
He said it pretty well.
Okay. I set you up for that, didn't I? Governor, could you talk about, in your experience, a time when you were able to put together a coalition to get something done, and what that may tell us about how to do it in these times?
Well, again, probably the hardest thing that you have to learn when you get into public office, which you've already done, but particularly when you're a governor, you'll find that you can't make everybody happy. And you're going to make decisions that not only are not going to be enjoyed by whose benefits are not going to be enjoyed by everyone, but some people are probably going to not do as well because of them. And you have to be very deliberate about listening to the experts, getting the best knowledge you can on a particular issue, and then doing what you think is in the best interest of the greatest number of people. And then you look to see, okay, who's not going to benefit from this, and what can I do to help them? But you can't allow your decision to be based on the last person in the room. It has to be a considered decision and it's hard. It's hard at times. One of the toughest that I had with families was we had been institutionalizing we had several large institutions for people with disabilities. And all the experts and everybody that I talked to about them said, we can do better than this. This is not the way, this is not offering people a real chance to succeed. No matter what their handicap is, this isn't, they're just being housed. And so I said, right, we're going to establish a series of community housing for people. And the families, the parents who had children, or the families of people who were in the institutions were really upset. And they said, well, wait a minute, my son, daughter, my relative, whomever, is in a place where they're comfortable and they know, they're told what to do, they know what to do, and you're going to disturb, you're going to ruin all that. And I had long meetings with them and saying, give us a chance. We are going to, I promise we will have the support for them that they need in the community housing. We're going to do it right. Give us a chance. And they did, and we did. And the most gratifying thing was the families that would come back to me afterwards and say, I never thought my son or daughter could do this. But now they're holding down a job. You know, they're a checkout person, or they're a janitor, or they're in an office. I mean, those are the kinds of things where you just have to do what you honestly, truly believe is in the best interests of the people you're trying to help, and then be ready to back that up with support for those who aren't going to benefit or may be hurt by it, so that you can try to even things out as much as possible. But it has to involve listening to the people and bringing them in and talking to them and hearing what their fears are and what their concerns are and why they think this is terrible. And then you have to go back and say, okay, but this is what I really believe we have to do, and go ahead and do it.
I think truth-telling is going to be really important over the next few years. We need to engage the citizens of Maine as adults. You know, while I'm running this independent candidacy, there's this Republican primary and a Democratic primary going on somewhere. And once in a while, our paths of the candidates overlap, and I find myself sitting on panels, discussions with some of the Democrats and some of the Republicans. And some of the Republicans are talking about providing a $1 billion tax cut, and they're promising that. And some of the Democrats are saying, no, we need to increase taxes because we have so many needs. And I have to tell you that the headwinds we're moving into, I think that's just reckless. Both statements are reckless. We don't know. I can tell you this, we know that we're losing a lot from the federal government. Maine is a net receiver state, and as anybody who reads the news will tell you, I mean, you all know that that's changing, a changing landscape. Governor you were the head of the EPA, and I think about all the scientists that have left the EPA. They're not coming back. Why would you come back when you have a expectation of a long career, and then it turns into a 4-year gig? So we're seeing changes right now. I don't know where they're going to lead. Nobody knows. But I think it's going to change the nature of the states versus the federal government. And as governor, we're going to need a governor that has the expertise and the experience to provide stability in this storm, because it's going to be critical for investment in our economy, for our small businesses trying to employ people, for meeting the needs of our most vulnerable people, you know, seniors on fixed incomes and those suffering from substance abuse, mental health issues. These are serious times, and we do need stability. And we're going to have to think creatively, too. I think the states are going to have to think about regional collaboratives and regional cooperation to replace some of the lost, or some of the effects of the changes at the federal level. So, yeah, this is an interesting time. And I just think we need to be optimistic, we need to be cautious, and we need to be prepared for an unknown future. But Maine people will rise to it. We're really good at taking care of each other. I mean, just the amazing outpouring of support we're seeing now in our food security networks is so heartwarming to see people step up. But it's a changed landscape, and we're going to have to rely on each other more.
I've got one more question, then I'm going to turn it to you. And this question is about the sense of hopelessness that so many people feel these days, and anxiety, and the way people get their information, and it just keeps pounding them. And then you hear about whatever it is that, unsettles you. How does the Forward Party and a candidate like Rick lift people out of that?
By having hopeful, positive campaign. And that's the other thing, one of the other things we call for, and we want our candidates to be joyful. I mean, it's a word we use. We kind of shy away from it in society in general. That's kind of squishy and you don't want to talk about it, but it's not that it has to be fun all the time to do these things. It's not always fun to make these decisions and to be in these positions, but it ought to be energizing. It ought to be positive. You're doing the best you can for people, and that should make you feel good. And that can bring joy. But it is backing candidates and telling voters, look, this is your opportunity to really be heard. This is a whole new way of looking at things. The two parties that we have are just not working in our best interests. We've seen that over and over again. And now we need to break that. We need to break that mold, get back to what, as I said before, our founding fathers envisioned and thought was the best way for a democracy to work. But we can do it in a positive way. It doesn't have to be negative. And that's what running a positive campaign is absolutely critical to restoring people's faith in the system. Not tearing down the other person, saying, this is great. They want to do that. They want to say that. But this is what I want to do. Here's what I want to do for you. Here's how I want to listen to you. I want to hear what you have to say. If I don't agree with you, I'll tell you why. But this is how I'm going to do things. And we can do this. We are more alike than we're different. There's no question. We all want the basic things we want to be able to support our families. We all want to be able to have meals. And we want to be able to educate our children. We all want that. And that's what we should always put in front, is remember, we are more alike than we are different. I had a pin made up for New Jersey while I was governor called Many Faces, One Family, because that's what we are. We're many faces, but we're one family.
I would just simply say that, just remind you again that the political structure as it currently is practiced is about the reverse of hope. It's about peddling fear, peddling othering, peddling hostility and hatred. And we need to stop that. And it is a willful act by every person in this room and every candidate running for office to be different and to reject that and lean into a politics of hope and lean in to a politics of opportunity, of treating people with respect and decency and dignity. That's a willful act on all of our parts, and we just need to demand it of ourselves.
Okay, so who has the question, sir?
Bob Staples. Maine is facing a growing mental health crisis with long wait lists, limited inpatient beds, and families struggling to care for loved ones with serious disorders like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. If elected governor, what specific actions will you take to expand access to treatment, improve crisis services, and support families who are carrying this burden without adequate help?
So just a sec. I'm going to summarize your question so they can hear it on the camera. The question was, Maine is experiencing a mental health services crisis, and what can be done here in Maine to get families and people who need that type of help better services.
Yeah, we have some great people working in mental health across the state, and we have some good programs and laws that have been stood up, as you know, Bob, but they're not being implemented well. And in fact, they've led to great tragedies. I mean, we have the progressive treatment plan legislation that Senator Nutting sponsored years ago, and it's gone really unused. People don't even know about it until recently. And then we've had all of these horrible circumstances where people have lost loved ones. There's been violence. Almost all of the tragedies you hear about in the news about people shooting their loved ones, setting fire to the houses, are because people are off their medications. I mean, it's just a reality. And we need to deal with that. And that we do have some laws in place and some systems in place. But when somebody gets off their meds and then they want to come back, they finally, after a lot of coaxing perhaps and a lot of loving intervention, they go into a center and say, I'm ready for help. They can't be put on a 60-day wait list because that moment is lost. So we need to make the current system work better. We need to take responsibility for our neighbors. We're sending a lot of people at great expense and harm to the families outside of the state because we haven't made the commitment to fully appreciate and invest in what we've already created here. So I think I'd start with that, Bob. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Next question.
Great. This morning there was an excellent editorial by Douglas Rooks in the Portland paper on the need for the state to step up and to create a universal health care system. Where do you stand on that issue?
Did you pick that up?
So I'll repeat the question. The question is, where do I stand on a universal health care system? Because there's a recent op-ed suggesting that we needed to go there. Yeah. I think we have a badly performing universal healthcare system now because people can go to a hospital and get care, but we don't want them to get care then, right? So I think the first, and I got to say about like a single payer system, I'm not sure it works for Maine. 1.4 million people. Vermont tried something similar. It didn't really work well. I think if we're going to do something like that, we need to do it in collaboration with our neighboring states, and we need to be regional about it. And I can see something like that working, but my primary focus in healthcare is going to be reducing costs because our current system is tremendously expensive. And there's things that the governor can do about these things. I didn't really know until Sarah and I started working. Again, somebody wrote an interesting op-ed and I picked up the phone and called him. And I learned something that I always felt that pharmaceutical costs were really only approachable from the federal government and the buying power of the federal government. But I learned that Massachusetts and Oregon have drug review boards that are helping cap the cost of drugs going up. You got a lot of cancer therapies and the GLP-1s that are very expensive, particularly in the United States, maybe not in other jurisdictions, but I think pharma is now about 30% of healthcare costs, and it's the fastest growing segment. So I would implement a drug review board like they have in Oregon to help cap the costs. I think we need to look at costs throughout the system. There's, I mentioned pharma, you got the pharmacy benefit managers. There's so many middlemen in healthcare making boatloads of money. There's administrative costs, and I think that drives part of the desire for a more of a universal system, just to save the administrative costs. And there are studies that show that a single payer system would drive down the administrative costs. But we need to be cautious with a state of 1.4 million people in terms of trying to go it alone. And I like to adopt things that are working somewhere else, right? And see, does this work for Maine? So that's what I'll be looking at with respect to changing our healthcare finance system. Did you have, all the questions are from me, but you know,
No, it
I'm
should
happy
be.
with that.
You're the candidate.
I'm happy with that.
I've been there, done that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stand up so everyone can hear me. Hi, Rick. My name is Chrissy Hart. I am co-chair of the Portland Area League of Women Voters. And I know you've been a champion of things like public funding for elections. We've heard a lot from both of you about some of the issues we're facing, attacks on our democratic processes. And we saw a really cynical attack on voter access this last election cycle with question 1. Can you talk about, given your experience championing Maine's leadership with pro-democracy innovations, what would you prioritize in that arena as governor?
Yeah, there's a lot of areas of focus that we could go into there, but the question was about what priorities in the area of electoral security, reform, et cetera. One area that I'm intensely interested in is campaign finance reform. Arizona has a great law that, because we've seen this flood of dark money come into our elections. I mean, tens of millions of dollars being spent in Maine to influence the outcomes of elections, and often we don't even know the source of those funds. And it's one thing, regardless of the Supreme Court decisions on Citizens United and the other cases, one area that is free range is disclosure. So Arizona passed a law and a referendum with over 70% of the vote to require the disclosure of dark money. How it works is if you have a PAC that wants to spend more than $5,000 in an election here in Maine to influence the outcome, that PAC needs to disclose all of its $5,000 donors. Okay, reasonable enough. The legislation, though, goes a step further and says, if that wasn't the original source of the money, then that source has to disclose all of their $5,000 donors. And if those weren't, then go back up the food chain to the dark money billionaire or the special interest group that's funding this whole thing. And that's now law in Arizona. It's survived court challenges, and I put the same bill in Maine. And sometimes I can get Republicans and Democrats to agree on something. They unanimously agreed to kill my bill. Another thing they unanimously agreed on is, we have a Freedom of Access Act in Maine, and this doesn't go straight to the point, but I'm thinking of it in terms of the reluctance to reform. So if you're serving on a town council or school board in Maine, you go to the diner with other people on that school board, you can't talk about school business, right? It's against the law without public notice and letting the public be there. Big glaring loophole to that. You know what it is? Partisan caucuses in the Maine legislature. So a majority party can sit behind closed doors, map out all of their decision-making, what they're going to do on a given issue, and there's no public inspection or transparency about that. So I put in a bill to change that too, to open that up, make the members of the Maine legislature meet the same rules as your select board. Unanimously killed, Republicans and Democrats. So there's a lot of avenue for reform. I actually think that we've got to get the party structure out of our elections. We've got this habit of there's party primaries, and they're funded by taxpayers, right? So this is why I supported the move toward semi-open primaries in Maine, which we enacted, which allows non-party people, independents, to go in and vote in one party primary or the other. And that's now the law. It's recently taken effect, and we don't know how it will influence elections, but I think it will be for the positive. And in the 2026 election, we've got two big party primaries coming up, and I think there's a lot of non-party people, including me. I haven't decided which one I'm going to vote in yet, but go to your town office or your polling place, and you can decide to vote in one of those parties. Only one, not both, but so I like the idea of taking the parties out of the electoral structure. And Alaska has a great model. They have an open primary in the sense that anybody can run. You can claim yourself as a partisan if you want, you don't have to. And they use ranked choice voting to winnow the field in that primary to 4 or 5 candidates. Those top vote getters then go on to the general election, again, regardless of party, and whether they're in a party or not, and then they have ranked choice voting to determine the outcome. So people are free to engage and be a member of a party, but we're not building our entire system around it. And I think that would be a very good, meaningful reform as well. Just a few ideas.
Governor Whitman, first of all, kudos to you for your leadership on environmental issues in the decade when you were governor and head of the EPA. I'm fascinated by your comments about a politics of shared values and a politics of joy. Ironically, it was a vice presidential candidate, Hubert Humphrey, who talked about politics of joy. He got slammed because the country was so divided over the Vietnam War and never got elected president. The question here is, both of you are former Republicans. Are there any Democrats who are kind of shifting into the kind of independent party structure that you're talking about?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at registrations now across the country, the independents are by far the largest. They're over 47, I've heard for anything from 46 to 48%. And the Republicans are 26 maybe, and the Democrats are 25. So it's clearly, you have people saying, forget it. I don't like either of my choices. These parties are going to the extreme. I don't fit in anywhere. And that's where we come in to say, we will give you that opportunity. We will give you that choice that you need, that you want. It's different from either of the parties. And it's working. It's working. We have people, we're just about even number, Republicans, Democrats, who have forwarded us. We're right there in the balance. They come to us because neither side is happy with what they've got. They see them going even further to the extreme. I mean, I do have to say, we did this to ourselves. We got complacent about democracy. We forgot about voting in primaries. You had a voter turnout of 10% in primaries, the most extreme, the most partisan. We didn't like our choices when it came to the general election. If Congress were the top of the ticket, if we got 35%, we were doing well. And for presidentials, 55. I mean, we did it to ourselves. We allowed our elective bodies to get more and more partisan and get more and more divisive. And so we have to remember that. It's up to us. It's only us. We own this. Democracy doesn't ask a lot of us, but it does ask us to be relatively informed and to vote. And so we can get it back by doing that. But we have to, and I think, frankly, in this last election cycle in 2025, we won some 19 seats. We were just about 50% of those that we had endorsed. And those who won for a third party that's only been in existence for 3 years, that's pretty amazing. And we won Republicans and Democrats, and we're getting both Republicans and Democrats. We've got several mayors on each side who have come over, who have said, we want this freedom. We want this freedom. We have a state senator who's a Democrat in Philadelphia, and his district, as a state senator, the school system was failing and his constituents wanted choice. And so he said, I'm going to support choice. And the Democratic Party said to him, if you say one word, if you go to choice, forget it. You're not getting any more bills through. We're not going to give you any money. We're going to go totally against you. And so he said, okay, I'm forward. I'm going to become a forward Democrat because then I know I'll be a Democrat. I'll probably caucus with you most of the time. I will vote for you most of the time. But when my constituents want something different, and it's what I believe in, then I'm going to do my own thing. And I can do it now because I know there's an organization behind me that will support me, that will help me with volunteers, help me with raising money, help me with strategy. So that's what it's all about. And that's what we can do and what we need to get back. We need to get back to that. And so I believe it's eminently possible to make this change, but it is up to us. And I hope that answers your question. I mean, I always laugh when people say, well, aren't you centrist? something like that wishy-washy word. And they used to ask me as governor, well, are you conservative? Are you liberal? I said, tell me what the issue is. I'll tell you where I am, and then you decide. Because I'm not going to be in the same place on every issue. I like to think for myself, and every issue is different. And I want that freedom, and I think we all want that kind of freedom in our elected representatives.
And I would just say one other thing on top of that, which is partial answer to your question. I just had the honor of announcing 33 former and current elected officials supporting my candidacy. 2 were sitting Democratic members of the state legislature, and one is Lydia Crafts, who's here today. Thank you, Lydia. Appreciate it. It's difficult to stand out like that in today's world. I can't tell you the number of people in the State House came up to me after my announcement. We had 1 day of session left. And they said, oh, thank God you're doing this. These are elected legislators, Republicans and Democrats. They know the system's broken. Thank you for running. I hope you win. Because they know it's broken. And they want it fixed too. So we just need to provide a little leadership, a little nudging, and that's what our candidacy is about.
The tragedy is that we're hearing the same thing when we go to Washington and meet with staff members of some of the senators and congresspeople, and they say, please, please do this. Run, give us a place to go. We will leave. We will leave our parties if we know there's something there, a real live structure there. So we're in about 25 states now with with organizations that are starting to become really real. We're on the ballot as a recognized party in 4, partially on the ballot. Every state's different, surprise, surprise. They all make it as difficult as possible. In fact, it's Arizona, I believe, that if you want to go run as a Republican or a Democrat, you have to get 7,000 signatures. If you want to do it as an independent, you have to get 45,000 signatures. That's the way the system is working today. That's just not right.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Sandy Butterfield, and my wife and I have been in the energy business most of my life, all of my life actually. And I'm very interested in your views on energy, both heating and electric. Maine has some of the highest costs in both of those areas, so I'd love to hear what your views are on how to deal with that.
Yes, I have strong views, and I don't know if we have enough time to cover them all, but let me just give you a few of them. Our electricity system in our state is driven by 2 large utility companies that do T&D only, not generation, transmission and distribution, Versant and CMP. And it's a wonderful business if you're in it because it's a natural monopoly. You get, your customers are captive. Your customers need to buy more from you over the next 30 years. The demand on our grid is expected to quadruple, if not quintuple. And so it's a recipe for making money. There's also a guaranteed rate of return on equity for these investor-owned utilities. And it would be one thing if they were incentivized to reinvest in Maine, reinvest in the grid, but they're not. And both of these entities, Versant is 100% owned by, guess who? The city of Calgary, Canada. The city of Calgary, Canada. The CMP is owned by a company called Avangrid, which in turn is 100% owned by a Spanish conglomerate named Iberdrola, which in turn is a company which is owned by a lot of sovereign wealth funds. So I think one of the problems we have is that we need to invest in our grid, and the structure demands a lot of oversight in order to get there. And a few years ago, there's an effort, I was part of it, to replace the investor-owned utility model with what Nebraska has, which is public cooperative ownership of the utilities and the grid. That, failed, didn't make the case, outspent, of course, by tens of millions of dollars, but it was the will of the people. So we're now reduced to trying to hold these entities more accountable, and we've seen in the news that there's some of that going on, with the PUC's recent decision to deny the rate request that CMP put forward. On the same token, we've been a little bit bad negotiators at the state level. We had the CMP corridor coming through, and I thought it was a bad deal for Maine because we weren't getting much out of the deal. You could be for it or against it. I had some environmental concerns about it, some constitutional concerns about it, but also it was just a bad deal. And I was unhappy that the governor didn't take the opportunity to renegotiate the deal when 80,000 people got signatures saying they didn't like it. Because that was an inflection point. The governor could have gone to those developers, Avangrid, and said, you got to do more for the people of Maine on this. So I express the frustration often that we have these public utilities, and the public is in their name, but they don't do a real good job serving the public. So we have a Public Utilities Commission to regulate them. And they don't do a great job either, so we hire a public advocate to advocate for the public against the public utilities in the Public Utilities Commission. So I can just tell you that I will be very careful and deliberate about my appointments to the Public Utilities Commission on that score. On energy, we're very reliant on heating oil in Maine. And that's a bit volatile. There's been a lot of stopping of, pipeline access for natural gas expansion in Maine. So in the fossil fuel front, we're stuck with heating oil. We've been a lot of building of heat pumps across Maine. That is a great solution. Like most of you, I have heat pumps in our house because one of the reasons was that when we built our house 15, 20 years ago, we didn't really think about air conditioning. But now, air conditioning is a thing. With a heat pump, you get that. So, but there's been a lot of advancement of heat pumps. And one of the things I've been thinking about recently is that we really need to start thinking more about like circular economies within Maine. We're the most forested state in the nation. Wood is a traditional form of heating. We've got companies like up in Bethel that make wood pellets, and they're part of the renewable energy system, lost a bunch of tax credits under the HR1. But, this is like using our natural assets in Maine to help heat Maine homes. I think the same thing about food security, right? We've got a lot of struggling farmers in Maine. We have people who need to be fed. I think we can do a better job creating a circular economy in Maine. In wood products, housing is another thing, wood products into housing. So I think I'm generally like all in on making sure that we don't pick winners and losers on heating, because there's also we don't really know where technology is going on home heating. And I just think we need to keep a broad-based approach. But we need to, as we do that, we need to think about how to support Mainers and the assets here in Maine and create that circular economy.
I'm going to have one closing question for Governor Whitman. But I want to thank you all for coming. Both the governor and the senator are going to be here afterwards to talk to you. The Forward Party very much requests that you consider Rick's campaign and support that campaign in any way that you can. And so, Governor, let's assume this is the situation. We have an independent governor called Governor Bennett. We have 10 Forward Party Congress people, women or men, and we have 5 federal senators. I'm talking about federal right now. What could this world look like if the federal government and the state government had Forward Party candidates in the middle of the parties that we have?
It would be a brave new world. And the beauty of it is you don't need all. You just need that nucleus. If we had, for instance, 5 senators in the U.S. Senate and maybe 10 members of the House, 3 senators and 10 members of the House, you wouldn't have had a shutdown. Would not have happened. And the same thing is true in state legislatures across the country and in town councils. I mean, let's not forget, every office is important. Your school board is important. Your library commission is important. These all up and down the ballot. We can't just go to the top. Definitely go to the top for the governor here, right here. Definitely do that. But we can't forget all those other offices. And it really, what it means is that you'd have a functioning government at all levels that was responsible to the people. And that really would be something to embrace and to hope for. And that's what we're about.
I was reminded when you're thinking about like change starts small, and Margaret Mead had that wonderful quote, you know, never doubt the ability of a small group of human beings to change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And so, you know, you can start small, you can start in your community, you can start with my candidacy, you can start with the Forward Party. Just start, get involved, lean in, have fun with it, find friends, and we can do this together. And I just want to say another heartfelt thank you, David, for your moderating here today and for your leadership.
We thank you very much.
Governor, I am so honored to share this
My pleasure.
space with you
My
and
pleasure.
to have your support in our race. And for all of you, I need your support too. BennettForGovernor.com, 2 N's, 2 T's, is the place to go. But really, I'm so grateful that you took the time a year before the election to come out for this conversation. It says a lot about each and every one of you and your commitment to fixing our broken politics and giving Maine the government that Maine people deserve. So thank you so much.